welcome to the Kevin Bennett's Trauma Show. This show is designed to help, build, and empower people, both the viewer and the person that we are interviewing. So, welcome on board. We've got a special guest. I really appreciate you coming on the show. Your story, your journey, who you are is absolutely powerful. So, welcome on board, Yammy. How are you doing, sir?
Yes, Kevin. For the viewers' purposes, it's Yammy B TV, but my real name. We'll talk about Samson
Yeah,
today.
yeah, yeah. Okay. So, we'll talk about Samson. Just before we start, define and differentiate the difference between Samson and Yammy B for those who don't know. So when we're in Samson mode, who are we talking to? And when we're in Yammy B mode, who are we talking to?
Well, Kev, good question, big man. Yammy B is a made-up name from jail. It started off as Jammy, meaning you're a bit lucky and you got away with a lot. Then it became Yammy because I used to rob a lot of people, sadly, back in the day, and it meant in our lingo, street talk, yam, as in yam, food, like kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it became Jammy Yammy. But Samson is the one that I am now, which is, I believe, the real me.
Mm.
The other Yammy was a bunch of jargon based on crowd pleasing, basically.
Okay, brilliant. So let's talk about Samson. Let's go back to as far as Samson can remember that you feel comfortable with.
It started, Kev. It was probably 79, no, 78,
Okay.
77, 78, 79.
Okay.
On holiday with
And so
mum
we're
and dad,
talking about 43 years ago, right?
about 45 years ago,
Okay. Okay.
45, 46 years ago.
Okay.
Mum and dad wasn't a happy
And
household.
sorry, how old was you at that time?
Well, when I first went into the children's home, it would have been about 10.
No, but so where you were, where we're talking about now, how old was you at that time with your mother,
Uh,
father on holiday?
so anytime, so I was only with my mum and dad
Yeah.
from 1 to 10.
Okay. Okay.
That was the home life.
Okay. Okay. All right. So let's talk about between that 1 and 10 year old period in your life. What was happening? What was your journey like at that time?
Funny, Kevin, because like I was saying to somebody earlier, that it wasn't a happy household anyway before I got into care. There
Hmm.
were things that I didn't know about mum and dad, i.e., just before dad died, jumping forward a little bit, we found out that one of my sisters was for another man. But we didn't know that until he died on his death. We realized because there's only me and two sisters. So in those early years, from 1 to 10, a lot of arguments, a lot of fighting. My dad used to hit my mum a lot. I
Hmm.
used to come up the stairs try and protect my mum for it as well. I used to worry at night, Kevin,
Hmm.
because I knew when the beatings would start, like when the kids are asleep, like I'd be asleep. I used to creep up the staircase and listen out at the door. As soon as I hear my mum crying, I used to run in, run in, run in. And I think my dad went to prison for stabbing my mum early on
Wow.
about my sister. So I didn't know that then.
Right. So your father, you believe at that time was well, partially could be a multitude of things, but he was angry about the fact that he discovered that your sibling wasn't his child.
Yes, Kevin,
Right.
that's it.
Right. Okay. And how many siblings did you have? You had two sisters you mentioned. Did you have any more siblings?
No,
Okay. And your father, was your father from, was it India?
yeah,
Okay. And your mother was from, was your mum from, was she British or where was your mother
yeah,
from?
British. Like, father was in the Indian Navy,
Right.
so when they used to dock up Wales and places like that,
Yeah.
that's how he met my mum in Newport, Gwent, and
Right.
basically uh, was with her straight away. Dad didn't have no family. Mum's family, she was already out on the street apparently at that time, and they met, and we moved to. East London, where I was born, under the sound of Bow Bells, which was Bow Road, January the 1st, 1966.
Wow, wow. And so your sisters, were they older or younger?
1 year older
Mm.
and 1 year younger. I was in the middle.
Right, right. And so the sister that your father discovered wasn't his child. Was that your older or your younger sister?
1 year younger.
Okay, so the younger sister. So this happened after yourself was when you was born.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when he apparently stabbed my mother, he went in Brixton prison for a week. And
Mm.
I remember partially that we all had to go into foster care while the younger sister was being born at that time. So he came back out of
Wow.
prison. Then we went back to live. We moved to West London, which would have been Ladbroke Grove, Harrow Road, Goulburn Road, that kind of area there.
Right. So what you saying when she was being born? So was your mother pregnant at the time when your father stabbed your mother?
To be honest, Kevin, I've never really asked the question, but I would have thought she would have just been born
Right.
because when we got to from foster care,
Mhm.
which I can't remember how long it was, maybe a few months or whatever, but until he came out of prison for the assault on my mother, and then we went to West London. By that time, my younger sister would have been born.
Right. Right. I understand. I understand. And so what happened? Do you remember what happened that particular day?
No, Kevin,
Mhm.
no. No, I don't remember. All the growing stages up until the care order at 10 was basically built on dad hitting mum, not working, being at home, cooking, blah,
Mhm.
blah, blah,
Mhm.
getting ready for school. But I remember I used to go to school crying quite a bit. I was a bit of a
Mm.
crybaby. Always used to worry about mum being hit kind of thing.
Mm. Right. I tend to talk about feelings a lot. Um, I believe feelings govern the way we navigate and the way we look at the world and our relationship with the world. So I'll probably talk about feelings quite a bit when as we conversate. Do you remember how you felt those days? So sometimes sometimes we can have a clear picture about a situation, or sometimes it's a bit hazy and blurry. I remember in my case when my son died, he was 12 days old. I can't remember certain things. I just only remember feelings. And when my brother died, everything was very blurry, but I do remember how I felt. How did you feel at that time? Going to school, um, did you see certain things, or did you just hear certain things, or do you just pick up? Children sometimes pick up a vibe that something's not right. What was it that you picked up, or how was you feeling around that time concerning
Good
your
question.
father, mother?
Uh,
Mm.
Yeah, no one's ever asked me that, but I know now that I was frightened and fearful
Mhm.
of waiting for the normal time that you suss as a kid when the beatings were going to take place. So I used to creep up at that same time every night by the stairs, wait by the door, Kevin. And then now she said outside he's listening, and then I used to hear her cry, and then I'll open the door, and then I would be the one to get the beatings.
Wow. Wow.
So the constant worry, say, of going to school and feeling fearful and frightened that is mum all right. So, sadly, I looked at dad as the kind of baddie, Kev,
Mhm.
that stage, so
Mhm.
it grew up and it went on and on and on for years up until he died. And then I kind of not had a change of heart, but I
Mhm.
saw things a little bit more different, if you
Sure.
like.
Do you remember how old your father was at that time, roughly? About.
Roughly, he had the stroke where he was disabled, paralyzed, blah, 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 driving back from Barry Island. He would have been if he died at 75 in 2005,
Mhm.
I would have been 35 in 2000, in which case he would have been 40 years older or 40. So around about that time, Kev,
Mhm.
n- No, I can't really get
Pinpoint.
the age
Sure. Sure.
pinpoint. No,
Sure.
no.
Coming from, I know like you've done so many different interviews, so we'll probably talk about things from a slightly different angle and perspective. Have you learnt to forgive your father, and have you gone down that journey? Have you travelled that journey of forgiveness?
Good question again, Kevin, because forgiveness is very much part of my faith
Mm,
now as a Christian as well. I'm not perfect. I'm still going along with the journey, but for some reason, I haven't forgiven certain things.
mhm, mhm,
I'm forgiving as I was in the Cathays in Whitemoor. They wouldn't let me go to the funeral, but they let Reggie and Ronnie Craig go, but they wouldn't let me go. But they took us in the Cat A van and with was handcuffed. And that was the first kind of dead body I saw. But I kind of felt sorry for him a
mhm,
little bit more
mhm.
in later life,
It's
Kevin, because I begin to believe now mum and dad didn't really have the skills, for certain developments that, when you're growing up, with education and things like that. Mum wasn't really educationally skilled it that way. My dad was a plumber by trade, worked for the council, very private man, but very, very, very serious. Never really spoke to anyone.
yeah. I mean, you said before that was he in the military? Was he in the army?
Yes, the Navy.
Yeah, or he's in the navy. And do you know about any conflicts or so that he was in, or do you know if he was any part of any wars or any form of you know?
I remember obviously the stories because he could box a bit, my dad.
Mhm,
And growing up with in the old days, Kevin, fair to say, it was more black and white. There wasn't a lot of different cultures around the 70s,
mhm,
that kind of stuff.
mhm.
And the Indians and the Pakistanis got a bit of a rough ride.
Sure.
It's fair to say from what I saw when I was younger. They were the group bit.
Sure.
So I hear stories. I used to deny that I was half Indian when I was
Mhm,
little because I
mhm,
always, I grew up amongst Jamaican families and they looked after me when I was a small boy and things like that. So I used to always feel that feeling of not wanting to acknowledge the other half of my bloodline. So I used
mhm,
to lie to people and say different things, but he's a very dark Indian. And my sister, the legitimate stepsister now, she looked more mixed racy, as in, like a black father and a white mother kind of
sure.
complexion. So I always used to think, but because he was so dark, it never used to cross my mind. I used to just think that she was the darker side of the family and
Mhm,
blah, blah, blah. But I heard my dad was a top promising boxer
mhm.
in the Navy and that he had a couple of fights, and both fights, both men ended up in mental hospitals and never were seen again.
Sure. Sure. So tell me more about that day. You said you're coming back from your holiday, your family holiday, and you discovered that your father had a stroke. Can you tell me a bit more about that, please? Or
I'm on
was it,
Barry Island.
or yeah, was it back? What was it that your father had a stroke, or you found out that your mother was stabbed at that time?
No, mum was stabbed probably 8 years prior to that when I was like 2 years old.
Right,
So
right.
they were still together. We got
Mhm,
back as a family. And then when we went to Wales, we used to go on regular holidays once a year to Barry Island, which is in Wales, Butlins. So Elvis Presley died that year. I remember that.
mhm,
So that would have been about 77, maybe. Yeah, because it
mhm,
came on the and I remember playing five-a-side at Butlins. I never really, sad to say, I didn't really have any feelings for my father at
mhm,
that stage.
mhm,
So we went to holiday early. Me and my sisters were taken to Barry Island with my godfather, a war veteran from the Second World War, Mr.
mhm,
Hall. He took us on holiday because mum and dad were having arguments up until the holiday and were fighting. So they were going to join us like a day later or something. Once we got there, they came a couple of days, started fighting in the chalet where we was, and had to go back early before the holiday finished. So on the way back, he was driving, suffered a stroke, brain thing and everything, and ended up in intensive care,
Wow.
paralyzed and thing.
Wow.
Mother took an overdose of loads of tablets. So both of them were in hospital by the time Mr. Hall brought me and my sisters back from holiday straight to the hospital to see them both in separate beds in intensive care.
Wow. Wow. And how old was you at that time? Was you 10 years old, did you say?
Round about that.
About 10 years old.
Yeah.
How did it feel seeing your father in one bed? And how did it feel seeing your mother in the other bed?
Kev, to be honest with me, old son, I was hoping that my dad would die. I didn't really have no feelings. I was staring out. There was a social worker here. Mr. Hall was there. My sisters was there. But the feelings that were running through me during that moment, as long as Mum lived, I would be sincerely happy. And
Mm,
yet, when I saw my dad in intensive care,
mhm,
I can't remember having any real feelings of by way of sympathy, sorry, blah 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 blah. I can't.
mhm,
But honestly, go through my mind that I hope he goes, because still I was of the opinion of blaming him for what's happened to Mum, not
mhm,
understanding the situation fully about what was going on, because what was related to me during that time. I've never really gone into, and I can't remember the hospital staff, social workers
mhm.
explaining everything to me properly.
Sure, sure. And so mother is in one bed and father's in the other bed. What happens next? What happens to you and your sisters? What happens next?
What happened is we left the hospital. Mr. Hall, who was a war veteran, lovely, lovely man. Never ever got to see him again, but he used to come. He was the only one that used to come and visit me in the children's homes in the institutions around the country when I was moved about, Kev. So a lovely man. He came home with us in the flat where I lived with mum and dad and my sisters,
Mhm,
and social services, two of them signed the care order. It's never really clear which one. They blame each other, whatnot. It's irrelevant now. Somebody probably had to sign it because there was no one to look after us. But on the
mhm,
night, probably 2 days after the hospital, all I remember is the police social door saying that you've got to go into care, and the neighbours to the right, to the left, came into the house. There was a lot of struggling and pulling and screaming. My sisters were crying, I
mhm,
was crying. Where's mum? That kind of thing. And
mhm,
yeah, but we didn't have no choice. But I'll always remember the screaming and the noise.
mhm.
It was definite.
Wow. Wow. And so you yourself, you're 10 years old, you have a sister that's 1 year younger than you, so I assume she's about 9 years old, eight, nine. And you had an older sister, the older sister 1 or 2 years older?
1 year.
1 year. So you're all kind of 3 years apart. And so there's three of you in the house. What happens then? Do they try to separate you, or are they keeping you together? You're screaming, you're kicking, you're fighting. You know something's not right here. You know something's not good. What happens? What is the feeling at this point for you?
The feeling, obviously, like it always was with me as a young boy, Kevin, was obviously more concerned with mum. I didn't really want to leave my mother, but they kept all three of us together,
Wow.
put us in a car with a social worker called Russell, drove to Westbourne Park um, in our nightgowns and pajamas, rainy Sunday night, about
Wow.
8 o'clock at night, dark,
Mm,
press the doorbell of the children's home, Portishead House, Brunel Estate. The door opens, and straight away, I didn't like it.
wow. Wow. And so what happened? What happens next?
What happens is that you've got staff, some of them good, some of them bad, like we always know in all lines of work, Kevin, is that I never felt people that are going to try and compensate for being a surrogate mother or father and we love you, and come and sit here. This is how families do it at the table with other
Mm.
children that have been put in care as well. It was just the way. I think the best way of explaining it is an environment that was completely different to how I was used to living,
Wow.
and obviously the love of mum as well. So the environment on seeing it, it's not the same thing,
Mm.
big man, to be
Mm.
sharing rooms with people, and there'll be more children there. They're not your brothers and sisters. You've got different staff. Some are approachable, some are just downright horrible. But for the next couple of years, I was there, and all the trouble started there.
Okay. And when you say trouble,
We talk about those early stages of one day, basically, big man. I'm with a lady member of staff, and
mm-hmm.
she's talking about maybe somebody's got to tell me about the birds and the bees,
Mm-hmm.
like, because there's no father figure in my life. So I was a late developer anyway. I didn't start puberty until I was about 19, right? So I was a very late developer, but I know what that means now. But we'll get onto that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and she says, "Oh, I can't talk to you about it." She said, and she was a good girl. I took a position of vulnerability on purpose. If I was going to go by percentages, I'd go 99% that she thought the man that she was going to send me to have a fatherly chat about what to expect through puberty and those kind of things. He was the man, the manager. So then the grooming started, the bathroom, toweling down, putting you to bed. But then you're 10, 11. But the only difference was when I was 10, 11, I looked about 4.
Right.
You know
Right.
what I mean?
So he's
So
really
that was
small.
different.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and then it all started. Uh, oh, this bit, that bit. Oh, and then started creeping into the room late at night while everybody was sleeping.
Wow. Wow. How did that make you feel? Some people it may sound like a ridiculous question, but it's very
Yeah,
important because when people have traumas, um, the trauma tends to right. There's two things that happens. You have a traumatic event that happens to you, and you have a trauma that lives inside of you. And sometimes to deal with traumas, we need to kind of be aware when that trauma first crept in. So I always ask that how did you feel, as ridiculous as it may sound, because we need to kind of find the entrance of where that trauma
yeah.
may have first started. So just back to that question, how did you feel at that time?
So I recognize now, later on in life, I was self-taught. I haven't had no counseling,
Mm-hmm.
never in prison. I saw a couple of psychologists, psychiatrists sometimes, and they said that I fell into there's 3 categories in the cates. You talk about mad, bad, and sad. They said I was sad because my stuff was based more on emotional stuff, and I was a one-trick pony basically to commit crime sprees and go back to jail very quickly.
Right.
But basically, Kevin, the things that stand out the most, the 3 things,
Mm-hmm.
is having suffered at the hands of this perpetrator a couple of times, then you know what time he's coming into the bedroom. So I used to pull the blanket over my head. But I remember my face used to go red because you used to know what was coming. So you know that this not being able to say no, I don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
Please leave me alone. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's very, very difficult when you can't say no or somebody's talking to you bad. Well, you won't get this. You won't get extra pocket money. I won't let you go to the Leeds United match to watch football and blah blah blah. But I remember the anticipation of the boogeyman coming in at night, used to leave me like my face going red. And then
Mm-hmm.
he'd say, you wait, that kind of stuff. Another time he tried to get me into his house was on the premises of the children's home. One night he tried to lead me down a fire exit in the dark while everybody's sleeping. I'd say, listen, I've got to educate you a little bit more, the grooming process. We know now how it works, Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, yeah. So it went on a good little while, I'd say about probably a year or so, or something like that. And then one of those days, I got the courage to tell the deputy head, which was a lady, and it ended up in a case at Westminster Social Services with everybody sitting around a table asking me questions.
Wow. Wow. And what happened there? What was the outcome?
The outcome, I still remember their names today. They made me feel like I was telling lies. They made me feel that I actually looked around those faces when I look now, and I remember, I know that they believed me, but they were holding their pens and tapping it on the side, like say, "What do we do with all this?" He got suspended. So if he got suspended, he had
Yeah.
dark glasses on. So while I went back to the children's home, waiting for the outcome of the inquiry, he
Hmm.
was still living on the premises. So therefore, he used to come up with the dark glasses on, and then other members of staff started picking on me, saying, "Oh, you're making up this kind of stuff." And da 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 da. Da. One morning, you got to go to school. I was crying a lot. I was going into school. Other children there, a bit more mature than me, ladies, girls were feeling quite sorry for me. And then one morning, I couldn't take it no more. I didn't want to go to school. And a 6'5" member of staff called David Fagg um, said, you got to go to school and you're going now. So I said, I'm not going. So he lifted me off the breakfast table with the Leeds United bag on my shoulder, put me outside the front door, onto the balcony, threw me down. I fell on the floor. I looked around, and there was a few kids that I used to get on the school bus with to go from Westbourne Park to Quinton Keniston, which was a 31 bus that used to go every morning, and I saw them all laughing. So I quickly got up. I was only 4 foot high, pressed the doorbell, went into the bag, got a geometry set out. You remember the old things we make the circles with,
Yeah.
Kev?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
little compasses
Yeah. The compass. Yep. With the pointy. Yeah.
with the pointed thing.
Yeah.
I don't know what made me think of that,
Mm.
actually. But I went into the geometry set, pulled it out, pressed the bell. He came marching to the door like he was some big tough guy. Oh, I'll just hit the kid again, kind of thing. But I rushed in with there and stabbed him about a lot of times. And he fell onto the chair. And I managed to get the school bag and get out, get on the bus and get to school. But I'd never forget the feeling on the bus. My adrenaline was kicking in. I was
Mm.
thinking, yes, yes, I can stick up for myself. I can do the thing there. I can do damage if I want, if I'm pushed, you know, that
So,
kind of feeling.
so you've said two. You said I'm gonna put into two categories here. What I've recognized is, and please correct me if I'm wrong. Every time you talk about women in your life in your earlier years, your mother was supportive and you recognize her love. And then when you spoke about the woman who, when you first went into care, once again, you felt the love and the caring side of her. And then on the parallel side of that, you have the men, and you talk about your father at night. That's when you remember the abuse coming, and then you now are in the children's home, and then at night again another guardian male has come and the abuse is coming. So it's, do you have trouble at night nowadays, or was you having trouble at night dealing with things, because there seemed to have been a repetitive pattern of males in your life, who you see as well, should have been your protectors, were the one that they were your abusers. How was your nighttime kind of life? Like, how did you deal with your nights, or was your nights fine away from the abuse?
No, I would say so. Two drugs came along, which they came pretty late because I was a late developer. I was in prison from a very early age from the stabbing,
Mm.
from the assault on the member of staff, who in fact I think died 3 or 4 weeks later from something else. So I was in Stamford House for about a year before they charged me with the ABH. But
Which was the
a lady
stabbing
again,
of which was with the stabbing of the man who
yeah,
attacked you. Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Hmm.
So he, not the abuser, but the a
Well, it's
friend, a
still a type
colleague.
of abuse, but yeah, yeah, yeah,
Still a type of abuse,
yeah.
Kevin,
Hmm.
right? So therefore, I'm going to court. I've got Mr. Hall there, the army veteran, a loving angel, saying to me, "Don't plead guilty." So I didn't know what to do. You got the police saying, social workers saying, "Look, look, look, just plead to this and plead to that." And then obviously something happened later on, a few weeks down the line, and apparently someone died. Not because of me, some other injuries. afterwards or whatever, Kev. But again, there was a lady in Stamford House, Goldhawk Road, where I was there. She said to me, Sam, don't plead guilty. You haven't done anything. So they held me for quite long, which would have been about 9, 10 months in a secure unit after
Wow.
that children's home. But then they came with a lesser charge of ABH with the thing. But on the previous convictions, it shows at 14 years old. But in reality, the case was a year old while I was in Stamford House,
Right.
Kevin. So
Right.
then I pleaded to the ABH, but the nighttime thing, um, it was a theme, I suppose, always because the living on edge in
Mm,
prison, especially throughout all my career, we know my behavior in prison was
mm,
very, very bad and subversive.
mm,
And at stages, I was a raving lunatic, basically. And I
mm,
didn't really care for authority. I knew they weren't going to let me out anytime too soon whenever I was in. It was always that way. I always served every day of every sentence. Went from the early categories as a professional burglar, sadly, to a lunatic robber, a madman robber for drugs, and in prison developed a reputation for that kind of stuff. But the nighttime thing, I totally agree. If I think I know what you're saying,
mm,
the living on edge, and always, because I've had ladies, my first ever experiences since I've been out with
mm,
ladies, and I'm always tense,
mm,
always like on edge. I can't say that it was developed through 40 years of war in those prisons,
mm,
but I believe the edge was always starting from dad in the night, that man in a children's home. So you're always like that,
mm,
always on edge because you know danger awaits. So you get familiar
mm.
with danger and bad things. So, in prison, is that fair to say? A lot of the years, everybody says that, yeah, Yammy knows he's very, very bright. He can look at something, he can see it straight away, he can sense danger
Mhm,
immediately. But I notice now in later life with the comfort thing as well, I find it very hard uh, to let go completely, if you get what I mean. There's always like
yeah.
the toe, like that, if you get what I mean.
It's like you're expecting the worst case scenario to happen.
So you're even thinking now. I realize after all them institutions, I'm always because I've lived with my hands in my pocket, reaching for weapons in prison day and night because of the fear and the wars and the things that go on for all them years. Uh,
Right.
I developed the fascination with weapons from the stabbing of the manager in the children's home because I was very small. I got very strong after that, but I never relied on that. I always knew that I was capable of using weapons, and I always also knew that when I picked up a weapon, Kevin, it could be really, really serious because it's all right, saying that, you're going to use a weapon for a first time is quite fearful. Some men go to prison, they haven't used weapons before. What you haven't been through, you don't know. But from that early age, I
Mm,
knew I had the bottle. So whenever I was to get angry, it might not be because you're shouting at me, but if you said something and it was meant to harm me by way of words and I couldn't get angry, I could always draw back to that
yeah.
and
In
get
that
angry.
moment. Yeah, I understand. So going back to that, so you pleaded guilty to the ABH. You're 14 years old at this time. What was the punishment?
The punishment was Stamford House,
Mm,
and then they were going to send me to an approved school, which was St. Thomas More, West Grinstead, where I met some of where I started mixing with the South London, Brixton kind of thing, where I met them there.
mm,
But I went to court. No, they assessed me from Stamford House to another children's home, which was in Mozart State. And I went to Mozart State, and that's where I started stealing.
right, right. And how was you feeling? Because you're there's a multitude of things that's happening. There's abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. You've lost your father in that moment. You've lost your mother. You've been moved around from place to place. Um, it's just a whirlwind. What's so naturally by default you're going to be going through survival mode. Everything about your life is survival. Did your mother get to ever come to see you? Was there visitation rights or
Now, I mean, in the children's home, they weren't. equipped to come and see me. But the one thing that stands out, Kevin,
Mm.
I'll always remember I had a school teacher at Quinton Keniston who was married to an army major. She was very serious in class. Everyone used to be scared of her. But yet she used to come to the children's home and bring me an Easter egg. But I can remember hiding behind the door because it wasn't my mum coming. And you know,
Wow.
everybody else's mum will come in to see them in the children's home, but I didn't want to be seen like a charity case. It always made me feel that as much as people, I know now that's an angel there, but you
Mm.
know, in reality, at the feeling time, I'm thinking, why'd you have to come and see me for? You're not my mum. I don't want no, I don't want, you know, you're feeling like the people that are helping you are only helping you because you're vulnerable and you need,
Mm.
and you don't want to be feeling that way. So
Mm.
when I got to Mozart, the sense of belonging, not allowed to see mum and dad, no family, no real bonding with the sisters really at that time.
What was the
You
sisters in the same
know,
place as you, or were they moved
no,
elsewhere?
no, they got moved on and got their own places from that same children's home. I never really inquired about it, to be honest. No one came to see me at all
Wow.
in any institution apart from fleetingly, you know, a couple of lady friends during certain sentences. But in the early days of going to court and going to Stamford House, detention centre, Aylesbury, one of my sisters used to come up there. But apart from that, I never saw one person. My mum never, ever visited the prison.
And how did you feel? Like, did you feel rejection, neglect? What was the
But
feelings?
I used to be more concerned with my mum because I knew she was vulnerable. She was an alcoholic. She stopped in later years though, but she never had the skills to know the difference about certain things. She's going to blame herself for me
Mm.
because I was a mummy's boy. And I knew that people out in the streets, having known my mum and grown up with my mum, I knew that she was an easy target for people. So I used to more worry about, so in the children's home, I used to sneak out at night, go creeping down to Bayswater and Queensway to try and find her because at school, somebody's friend, older brother, would say that your mum's drinking down there with my older cousin or my sister. So I used to sneak out the children's home, walk all alone down to Queensway, which would be about a mile or two away.
Mm.
And then I would go there, wait outside there and see if I see mum. And then I have to walk back. I used to leave the back door open, but then I used to get caught. And then that same man would ground me, blah, 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 wouldn't be allowed out. It was always that way, Kevin. Ever
Mm.
since I can remember, everybody was going out partying, blueses, raving, but I was always the guy that had to go home early
Mm.
to an institution.
Wow. Wow. And so you're now 14, 15 years old. You're in this institution. What happens then? How long are you there for?
Well, so you're talking about 10 to 12 to 13 in the first children's home. The
Right.
abuse happens, I go to Stamford House for about a year.
Right.
I get allocated and assessed, and I go to Mozart Children's Home,
Mm-hmm.
where my special memories are, all for the wrong reasons, where all the stealing first started, the crop skin shoes, the skin shoes, the ducket, the Cougarans, all the stuff that the West London lot, you know, created by way of material items that many have followed ever since. I was idolizing those guys who were looking the part. So I was in the children's home. They would nicely say, yeah, come with me. I'll show you the way. Knock on the door. You look small. Go with a bucket and sponge. Be the car wash man. If they don't answer, I'll go in and do the job kind of thing. So I got taught. So, but there was no one else around me, no other uh, figures around me that were talking any other different talk.
Mm.
Everybody was a crook.
Mm. And it's very interesting what you're saying because this, it's like you can move your story from 40, 30 years ago and bring it right to 2021. And it's the same thing happening because we hear, you know, children, good children, getting caught up in bad environments, and the child is in that environment because of a trauma. But then the journey of how people demonize that child to be a bad child, not investigating that the child is experiencing trauma. So when you're hearing about a child stealing or you're hearing about a stabbing or certain things, straight away, you know, there's a kind of a public opinion about that child, just a bad child, you know, condemn them to hell kind of mindset, but not truly investigating that the child has gone through so much trauma And sometimes a child just needs love, and a turnaround will start to happen. What would you say in your situation? So you're 14 years old. You know, you look young. You're small. You're smaller than the rest. You're trying to find ways to fit in and find a family. And so you're now part of a circle, right? What was your mindset at that time? How was you feeling? Okay, I've got some guys around me. What was that feeling? Was that feeling family, or was that feeling protection, or was that feeling was just I don't care? What was it that you was feeling, experiencing at that time? What was your self conversations?
My self conversations is that being brought up, fair to say, the majority were of black color around me,
Mm,
and some white as well, Kevin. But I felt like I was wanted. I felt like they needed me for certain things to knock on doors, and so I felt that special need that where they're saying, "Come on, son."
oops, think we've lost you.
Where was we, Kev? We was at the
Um,
Mozart estate, hanging
y-
around with the bigger guys, going stealing,
yeah. So
and
basically, yeah, you're saying that
I used to idolize them, Kevin.
yeah.
Like I had these figures, tall, dark, looking slick. And I used to always be fascinated because them days, the lovers rock, the blueses, the music kind of thing. Mum, though, used to take care of me. I think those early moments of a little bit of love, albeit, now I know now it was more out of sympathy and worry and concern.
Mm,
Because if your mum knew you was thieving, they would always say, please leave Sammy here with me, kind of thing. They never really wanted me to get into that kind of trouble because they could see what I couldn't see, that I
mm,
was like basically a lost little boy who didn't have nobody.
mm,
But basically, I loved those guys
mm.
and I would have done anything they said.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. How old were they? Were they about same age or a bit older
Yeah,
or
but yeah, they were, Kevin, but older than me,
yeah.
mature
More
wise, if you get what.
mature, yeah, yeah. They've seen the world a
Yeah,
bit more, they've experienced a bit more, they've probably got
yeah,
more of a network around them, so it gives them a bit
yeah,
more of an insight into relationships as well, which
yeah.
I would have assumed that it would made you feel good.
Yeah, but none of you used to get. Everyone used to knock me. They used to always say, "Yeah, I find this." I said, "What's this?" And nobody would want to give me my half. You'd have to wait outside while they sell it, and you don't know how much they're getting for it. That kind of thing. But
Mm,
very, very early, I went
mm,
to jail too young after the stabbing. It wasn't long after Mozart. I didn't get arrested doing any burglaries or anything, but they said that I was stealing. So they moved me to St. Thomas More, which was a bad boy school out in the countryside, which was described as an approved school, which was run by brothers and monks and whatnot. A couple of people that probably you might have come across in your early days were there, and basically subjected to beatings there. Everybody used to be able to go back to their mums from Horsham, Sussex, to their families at weekends. But again, I was one of the ones that couldn't go home because it wasn't stable enough.
wow, wow. And so what happens next? Like, you've gone from abuse at home, and then you've been put in a home because of the abuse that's been happened. Well, not directly that happened to you at that time, but obviously the conflict with your mother and your father. And then you go into a home, and then you're abused in the home, and then you're physically abused just after all the other abuse has happened, and you defend yourself, and then you're put into another home that's a bit more secure, and then you're moved into prison for stealing. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. And so
Yeah.
now you're in prison. Um, Prison's more scary, I would imagine. Or is it more scary in your case?
Well, to be honest, when I first, so you've got the stabbing,
Mm,
you've got moving from Mozart to the approved by monks in Sussex, Horsham for about a year. So then I absconded, stayed at a friend's house, started burgling, got arrested for a string of burglaries, and got a detention centre where you have to march everywhere. I was in the courtroom, a juvenile court, the laid bench. two ladies and a man. They said to me, Samson, listen, there were three of us. They said, we don't want you to go to prison. We want to put you back into care. But I was so frightened about children's homes. I
Mm,
said, nah. I said, I want to go to prison and I want to be hard. I
mm,
want to be able to do a detention center, Borstal training, and say, yeah, I've done a Borstal. I wanted to be able to do that. Some of the guys that had done, oh yeah, I've done a detention center. Oh, I've done a Borstal. I was trying to get them ticked off
mm.
for the CV.
Right. And so, how many years between institutions and prisons would you say you've been in? How many years collectively?
I say collectively, from the day of the stabbing at 12 years old, 12 to 13 when I went to court, I would say I've had one Christmas out, two now,
Mm.
since last year. That was my second. That was my second Christmas in 38 years.
Wow.
Right. So I've never done a January to January out. We started with the 3 year sentences, the fours, the six, the eights, the 12s, the eights. But the only difference is with me and a lot of other long termers, Kevin, is that my periods outside are like 6 weeks, 7 weeks, serve all the sentence. You see what I mean?
Wow.
So
Wow.
very short periods out and long periods, more than the sentence I get,
Mm.
I end up doing more whilst I'm in jail.
Wow. So let's talk about you at this current time and what you're experiencing. Firstly, what is it? Congratulations for being out. Firstly, congratulations. Um, what is like? What's life like for you now on the outside?
To be honest, it's a big question, but to be totally honest, the other thing I haven't told you, Kev,
Mm.
is that I died 2.5 years ago. I had a
Wow.
cervical spinal injury. I fell off the top bunk bed in Wandsworth, cervical 3, 4, 5 fracture, never to walk or use my hands again. I was in
Wow.
hospital for 5 months. I had to be hoisted out of the bed. They had to feed me. The screws, the officers were sitting around me, blah, 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 blah. Then I got back up. But obviously now, the whole of that right side, they're calling me the invisible walker. Really, I'm meant to be dead. Leastways, I'm meant to be in a wheelchair. Might still be one day. But, the spasms, the thinking. I came out the day of lockdown to go and live with my ex-missus, right? The
Mm.
journey that I've been on, I don't know how it's happened because
Wow.
my processing with my brain, with my fingers, I can't hold certain things. The feet, you don't know where your feet are, the
Mm.
pain and all that. But basically, I was a strong man. They're saying it's a miracle and all that. But to be honest, I haven't noticed anything. All I've noticed is the Father in heaven, and that whenever I've been in trouble, the
Mm.
guardian angels have come to rescue me.
Wow. And I think that's powerful because most people fall apart for from so much smaller things and you've gone through so much. And so let's talk about your mindset. Um, when you think about the past, what feelings comes to mind firstly, or what feelings do you conjure up?
I conjure up that at the beginning of time, it's not my fault,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we know that we can safely say that what happened in the beginning, 10, 12, 13, possibly up until about 16, 17, because I was a late developer, I didn't know what was what.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't only right from wrong from the early days when I was doing crime, I didn't really like doing. What conjures up to me now is that a lot of my victims from burglaries, robberies, guns, things, fighting in prisons. All right, prisons, different things, survival. I don't feel the same way about those, but
Mm-hmm.
I do regret the people that didn't do anything to me that I've made victims out of. For the simple reason that is that nobody there weren't, you could have told everybody the whole truth while you was out when all the abuse happened, but yet nobody listened.
Right.
Nobody listened. They swept it all under the carpet, Kevin. So I conjure up acceptance, responsibility for
Mm-hmm.
all my crimes, for all the years. I even made myself do more because of the guilt and the shame. We know
Mm-hmm.
that, you can get material stuff, you can get money. But for me, I never have felt good with dirty money. that people, and scaring people, and then using the money. All I did was use the money to spend £1,000 a night on cocaine and basically sit on my own in the dark.
Well, so we're made out of atoms, right? That's what we're made out of. We're made out of atoms. And inside of an atom, there's many different elements, particles inside of an atom. But you've got a proton, you've got an electron, and you've got a neutron. So when you're in a proton state, you're in a happy state. And when you're in an electron state, it's a negative state. When you're in a neutron state, it's like a dimmer switch. It kind of, you can move in between. And when you're in an electron state, you've got depression, anger, doubt, worry, pessimism, jealousy, rage, and so on and so forth. And so when we're talking about your earlier years, you talk constantly about worry. So it's an electron state. Um, there's doubt, there's fear, there's elements of anger. So your world is consumed with a lot of electrons, okay? And then you're moved into a home, and that home, there's also electron things happening, electron behavior, assault, abuse, and so on and so forth, okay? And so your response is also within an electron zone because there's nothing else you can do. Your frequency that's happening to you emotionally from beforehand and physically with the abuse of your father. And then you go through the process and now you're into another electron environment, and then more electrons are happening. And then you respond in the way that your frequency is, which is by the stabbing. And so now you're going into another electron zone, and there's element of fear, and there's an element of, even when you see you had that adrenaline rush at that time, it's a adrenaline rush that is feeling better, but you're still in the electron zone when you was on your school bus, okay, going bus to school. And then from that electron zone, you've gone into another care home, and then from there you went on to prison. And sometimes in life, yes, we should always take responsibility, but sometimes in life, we are so deep in the electron zone that we do not know how to do anything else but to survive in electron zone. And it's about survival, okay? So it's really about now understanding the frequency that you was born into. So the frequency that you're born into, especially in that situation, was an electron frequency. And so I'm very interested about the frequency of how mother and father came together, because they came together in electron zone. Um, and we can see that based upon how the relationship was even in the earlier years. There's something that happened to your father in the Navy and even before then. And there's something that he was suffering in those earlier years of his life. And he never expressed it because he had the trauma going on. And so he did not know, as you said something very powerful before. And what you said was he didn't have anyone to talk to, he didn't have any family, he didn't have an outlet. The only outlet he had was boxing and to fight and to go into the Navy and to somehow be in an electron war zone. And so electron and protons, proton positive, electron negative, it's like when you get two magnets together, they kind of try to get them together at times, and they just keep on moving around each other in a sense. And so something happened that brought your mother and father together. So there's something that happened that your mother was also in an electron zone as well. And we can born from electron frequency, and it takes a lot longer and sometimes a lot harder to move from an electron zone to a proton zone. So you would have to make more effort than the average person because your frequency from the early days was electron driven. It was electron generated. Now you need tools to bring yourself into a proton zone and live as much as you can in the proton zone. You know, hope, optimism, fun, playfulness. And playfulness is very powerful. We can discuss that in a bit. Playfulness, joy, and work the journey to happiness, but content as well. Do you have tools that you can consciously kind of, okay, I'm going to take this out of my toolbox? Do you have tools to help you get into a happier zone or a proton zone? Because when you think back, um, and how the mind works once again, in order for you to make decisions about the future, the mind goes back into the past to make a decision about the future. That's why we say sometimes, I don't like people like that, or I'm not a fan of that particular thing. You've never experienced it before, but you're not a fan of it. Because what our minds do, it goes back into the past to make a decision about something in the future. And so, what tools do you, or do you have tools at this precise time that helps you to navigate through the future or towards the future in a happier state?
But Kevin, the thing about it is I've never showed any signs of anger ever in history. I wake up every morning delighted. I've got a bit of ADHD that wasn't spotted when I was a kid. I'm a happy-go-lucky man until I start putting negative and darkness into my body. So I always knew right from wrong. I never felt good about doing bad things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't forgive myself for doing what I did in the children's home.
Mm.
You know, I don't forgive that because I knew that I had no place to go. There's either you get bullied, persecuted, and picked on and bullied, which was a theme during those early years with the vulnerability.
Mm.
But once I mastered the institutions and became king of the castle because I know what institutionalized recidivism means. That means
Mm.
I know where all the folders are buried in the closet. I know what he's going to do as soon as he comes out the door. I know that I can look at somebody for a second and know what he's thinking. I
Mm.
know what there's only selected moves that you can have in an institutional setting.
Mm.
So I would have that all mapped out in my mind. So I felt at home there.
Mm.
So whatever way you look at it, I've been happy all my life
Mm.
until drugs and things interfere with my character. The
Mm.
reason why I'm moving along with my journey now and giving back and making amends and sending out the powerful messages that I'm doing for the
Mm.
disabled, for the mental health, for the addicts, for the people, the traumas, for the youth of today. Those are
Mm.
all the things that I'll be promoting on my channel
Sure.
and very soon.
Sure.
And and Kevin, how I control it,
Mm.
the dark thoughts, the behaviors developed from institutions.
Mm.
Who are you talking to? That means disrespect.
Mm.
That means that. No, it doesn't mean that. That's what we were taught to
Mm.
believe it meant if someone calls you a ussy or something like that, or something you're meant to say, I've got to draw my thing.
Mm. Mm.
But that's what they said.
Mm.
That's not what I believed in. I
Mm.
just went along with how everybody else did it in that game. But that doesn't mean that was who I really was.
No, no,
So I already
exactly.
know who I am.
Exactly. Exactly.
I know who I am.
Mm.
And I know that deep down, I was a proper little sweet boy. I was
Mm.
just good to play different roles
Mm.
with different cultures
Mm.
and lost my own identity in the meantime. So
Mm.
you're playing up to this one and that one to get what you want, the same way they did it to me,
Mm.
that kind of stuff. But you kind of glorifying that you're clever because you can pull this one and can pull that one. But hey, there's many other ways of
Mm.
getting that same self-esteem, but with no consequences and nobody getting hurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see it?
Yeah. So
But
you.
if you would have taught me, if you would have taught me and said that, hold on a minute, you're in the wrong game.
Mm.
You're a happy guy. You don't like hitting people. You don't like belittling people. You don't like making people because you know what it feels like. So I feel empathetic, sympathetic, all those things that you're not meant to have. I had them all my life
Wow.
and knew I did.
Yeah.
But to play up to the crowd, that's like saying, like, I don't want to come out on that yard tomorrow and I don't want to kill you. But because I love you, I will do it for you. But not because I love me. I'm prepared to sacrifice absolutely everything, death, everything for the love of somebody that I like. So the
So you said
misconstruedness.
something. You said something really powerful. You said in the process of trying to kind of please everyone, you end up losing your identity. Um, who is Sammy today?
I'm being who I was meant to be. I know that everybody's out here and they're saying, how come this is happening for him? How come? I don't know how it's happening for me, but I know why deep down, because I know that he knew that I was lost and I didn't have a clue and there's nothing I could have done about anything. So he's going to favor me because why? He knows the intention of what's inside there and why you're doing the things you're doing. You're not doing it because you've got hatred and bitterness and all those kind of things that are meant to have after the bad life. I haven't at all, Kevin, which is why I wake up every day laughing, injuries, everything, dying, paralyzed, can't do much, but still I go riding on. And I go riding on because I know I've got a mission. I've got a mission to complete and a mission to prove that I wasn't meant to have lived that life.
Wow. So okay, let's do something. Um, you say forgive or don't forgive. Okay. Father.
In later life now, you ask me this, and I start to forgive.
Brilliant. Mother.
Lover forever.
Brilliant. Um, abuser. First abuser.
Mm-mm. And anybody involved with taking away somebody, anybody, Kevin, that thinks they have the right, because there's all campaigners out there saying, "Oh, it's genetically they got faults, they were abused, and blah blah blah." I never really got that concept because I'll tell you why. Because if you didn't like what was being done to you, how could you want to do it to another human being if you knew that you felt bad and hopeless and you couldn't do nothing about it?
Yeah.
Whether it's genetic or not, we know that pre-puberty it interferes with your development and everything and all that. I know what I suffered was emotional shock during the early stages when that's why they were worried that I was growing too late. But I believe that comes from that.
It's
People
a trauma.
interfering and mapping out what you're like, what you're gonna like sexually, what you're gonna like mentally. They're taking control of somebody's life and mapping it out for them before they've had the chance to live it, which is
Yeah.
the worst of crime. Can
Yeah.
I forgive that? I don't forgive myself for robbing and burgling and robbing dealers and doing all that kind of stuff. I find it hard to forgive myself for that. There's no way, even as a God-fearing man, at this stage, could I ever forgive anybody at the start of somebody's life that they can play a hand in the outcome before that person or that child has had a chance to live it.
Mm, mm, right. I understand. Do you forgive yourself?
Do I forgive myself?
Mm,
I forgive myself. It's half and half. It's half and half. I'll tell you why. Because of the crimes outside. I forgive myself um, for what happened when I was younger now. Because I know that I couldn't do nothing about it. I didn't have the skills. I didn't have the assertiveness. I couldn't say there was other developments that obviously we haven't gone into today that I didn't really want to go
that's
for the
fine.
build up of, to make the trauma even worse,
Yeah.
Kevin. But the wisdom to know the difference in that. That's not my fault.
Mm,
But anything after that, as a young adult, creeping around, stealing this, ruining people's lives, that I have to accept responsibility. Do I forgive myself for and putting misery on other people's doorstep because I was taught in the from my misery.
mm. I think you're slightly breaking up, unfortunately. Um, Hope we can get you back on board. Can you hear me at all?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It just broke up a bit, just for a bit. Um, so a question is that I want you to kind of ponder over. Do you believe that forgiveness um, gets the other person off the hook, or do you believe that forgiveness kind of, or not forgiving yourself, doesn't get you off the hook? Is it like a self punishment, or is it a kind of court case in your mind, the world of forgiving or not forgiving?
I so all right. We look at all crimes
Mm-hmm,
individually.
mm-hmm,
We know that I'm using my survival skills and the way that I was taught to con people on their doorstep, pull little tricks and scams to manipulate to get what I want, right? On the other side of the coin, you've got the abusers, grooming, manipulating in the same deceitful, conniving way that I did to get gear inside, to rob this, to con that, to do that. So when they're grooming, they're doing the same thing,
mm-hmm,
but only they're doing it to children
mm-hmm,
who have a right to learn the right way by the proper teachers so that they have a chance to not have traumas. We're all going to go through traumas in life. No matter
exactly.
what age it's going to be, your mum's going to die, your dad's going to die, someone's going to die in a car crash. All these things are going to happen, are
Mm-hmm,
going to be described for the person involved or close by
mm-hmm,
as traumatic.
mm-hmm,
What you're doing with that kind of stuff, I can't forgive that as an adult, conning your way into an authority job, football scouts, schools, nurses, doctors, police, all that. We know that near enough every single job where there's authority
mm-hmm.
or of some kind, it could have been a breeding ground
I
for.
believe they I believe they should be punished on the highest level. I
So do I.
personally believe that
Yeah,
they should never be released from prison.
that's what I
Um,
believe too.
yeah, I don't believe it should be a negotiable. I
And
do
I said,
hear
and
the
Kevin,
conversations about it could be a mental disorder and so on and so forth.
no,
But
no, it's genetic.
I personally, from
Well,
my
you
point of
tell
view,
me,
mhm,
Kevin, with due respect, big man,
mhm,
you tell me then what I've just told you, psychologists, the experts, and blah, 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 blah. Oh, there's a percentage of abusers that become abusers.
mhm.
Do you think that is a defense?
No, it's no defense. They say there's two things. They say hurt people, or hurt people, heal people. And
Brilliant.
so I do believe that there's a thing called developmental trauma. Developmental trauma is what happens to you in your developing years. So that like between 1 to probably 4 or 5 years old. Some people may say a bit older. Some people may say a bit younger. And so your brain will form based upon the traumas that you've kind of, accumulated in that period of time. And so there's always been the argument of the person who's abusing, and I'm not saying for all abusers, there's always been that argument about the person who's doing the abusing. Sometimes in their developmental years, they 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 don't know any other way to connect with the world, and so there's a plausible argument. But nevertheless, people are still being hurt by it. People are still being abused by those people, and if they cannot function in society without harming people, hurting children, and putting themselves in the place of authority, they shouldn't be a part of society. That's my personal view. I've debated on it many different times. I don't believe
I'm
they
in
should be a
total agreement with you.
yeah. I don't personally believe they should be a part of society. Um,
I mean, look at the change in sentences. In the old days, they used
mhm,
to get smaller sentences. How many years did it take them and the public to scream that you've got to start getting larger
yeah.
sentences? That it is a lifetime crime,
Mhm,
not just sexual abuse or a little bit of fiddling here and there. What's
mhm,
actually happening here is as bad as murder,
yeah. There's
except the person has to live all that time remembering. And remember the big thing, Kev,
mm,
is that you always think that something's wrong with you. So the
yeah.
men you think that they know that you've been abused, they're thinking, oh, kids are there. He might be stereotyped. He might be funny. He might. You've got to deal with all this psychological stuff,
Mm,
which I had to teach myself because I worked it all out psychologically and
mm,
the genetic makeup and black. But the greatest thing was obviously the self control to
mm,
know what you're thinking and what's the dark side and what's the light side.
mm,
You know that by doing that, you know what kind of thing. It doesn't excuse my robberies and frightening people. It'd be like saying she got burgled, became a burglar.
mm,
She was traumatized by the robbery, he was,
mm,
and became a robber.
mm,
You see what I mean? We know it's different
yeah.
because genetics are going to be in, because what they're doing is abusing you and then making. So if you touch here and you touch there, and yeah, how about that bit? How about that bit? And you go, oh, uh. So you're already identified. So what about when a lady in later life touches you in the same place? What do you think it's going to remind you of?
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Constant
triggers, anchors and
reminder,
triggers.
which
Yeah.
becomes which becomes the trauma that you're speaking about, big man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there's no way once things have happened and it's stored in there and stored in there,
Mm,
how do there are constant reminders? You see a man that looks like blah blah blah. You think, oh, he looks like him.
mm,
Oh, he was from that area down in such and such. Oh yeah, I remember that. He was
mm,
from there.
mm,
Where does it ever end?
yeah.
It's only because God gave me the strength of character
Mm,
to ride through everything and to get off my deathbed and to come out and to start making amends, because I won't ever harm anybody, a member of the public, innocent member of the public again. I don't know how the wars are going to end. Like to say, Kev, I
mm,
don't know what it'd be like if someone walks up to me and wants to pull out a knife, or he wants to use a gun on me, or what. I don't know if I'm going to protect myself or not. But I
mm,
could honestly say, when I was on my deathbed and I spoke to God in intensive care, they all laughed at me. They laughed at me, and I told them how this last bit was going to go, this bit happening now, and
wow.
everything that's happened in these 15 months.
Wow.
Mom dying, relationship, first ever relationship, mix up, snakes, learning where not to go, not to go. All the simple things that I was supposed to learn.
In the
People
earlier years.
worry, and I've got angels. I don't know where they came from. I
Mm,
don't know what I've done to deserve such quality help from decent people, good
wow.
people. And if I would have known there were good people out there, that you don't have to, you don't have to be on the dark side. You don't have to be on the side
Mm,
where everybody's bad. That if you're shown that by feeling safe, we know that there's going to be imperfections. People are going to have their daily arguments. Just because you're not a criminal, it doesn't mean that you're not going to be bad in any way, but at least you know the
mm,
good people. You go there, you don't have to play up to the crowd. You don't have to pretend to be a bad man.
mm,
You don't have to say, all right, I'll do that for you and all that, because they don't grow like that.
yeah.
They don't want you for that. They
Mm,
want goodness for you. To know all that in later life, to know that all I had to do was basically walk from here over to there to find the surroundings that were more suited to me
mm.
in later life, I feel really chuffed about that,
So,
Kevin. I
and that's
really, to see
brilliant.
that there's
Yeah.
warmth and love in certain places. I realize now. At first, I was loving this, loving that one, but now I break it all down. I'm a soulful person. I
Absolutely
go with
brilliant.
the heart, and if you're being true,
Mm,
if you're true, I love you forever. And that's the one thing that I'm good at spotting, is the
mm,
baddie, the boogeyman. good people. We get it wrong sometimes,
Yeah,
Kev.
yeah.
Everybody comes in all different shapes and disguises and say they're this. I've done it myself to get my own way.
Mm,
But in the end, he knows what you
mm,
mean.
yeah. And so, what would you say to that 9 year old who may be watching, or that 15 year old who may be experiencing? What advice would you give to that boy or girl about what they may be experiencing, similar to your journey?
I'm not, they're an alien species to me, kids under 14s and whatnot, like ladies.
Mm,
I don't get, but I get that I'm childlike. I get that they get excited when they see me because kids pick up on things really quickly. They can spot, baddies, and they know that someone's a bit weird and that you can see it on them. But,
mm,
with me, obviously, the lovable road, the character, love, fun, whatever, playful all day, all night,
mm,
in my element. But I'm good at watching the signs for distress to see
mm,
if something's going on in their lives. Like I'll pick a question, I'll say, "Well, everything all right? What happened there?" You know, you
mm,
can catch them thing. But my advice is if anybody, we know the one about stay away from strangers, be careful, of men who, or ladies even, that get too close too soon or trying to, when your mum's not there or your dad. But the first sign of anything that doesn't feel quite right,
mm,
you have to go and tell somebody.
mm. And even if the
Never
first
be
person
afraid to
doesn't
say
listen,
no
go to
either.
another, right?
Go to another because in the old days it took 10 or 15 before you got heard, not these days,
Mm-hmm,
because they don't want the comebacks on everything now. So
mm,
it gets reported quite quicker, even though we know it's still going on. We if we're being totally honest, Kevin Bennett, we know that in the 70s, 60s, 70s, early 80s, a lot
yeah,
got swept under the carpet and a lot
yeah,
of people knew what was really going on. Let's be
exactly.
straight about this.
Yeah,
I
very
sat around
true.
the table, I saw it firsthand. I remember. So when all this stuff's coming up in later years about Savile, hip hip hooray, and this one and that one, and
Mm,
that's happening, I'm thinking, yeah, it's only now you want to talk about all this kind of stuff,
mm,
you know.
yeah,
But
it
I
was
all I
wrong.
would say, I always tell kids when I'm around children. I haven't been around a lot, but I've been around a couple of families
Mm,
lately, and it was a good experience for me. 4,
mm,
5 year olds, that kind of stuff.
mm,
And I always, I'm security conscious.
mm,
Always, always doorman for the drug dealers in prison.
mm,
Always bodyguard for the bad man that needs a bodyguard.
mm,
Follow me here, follow me there. I hear that, I hear that.
mm,
So everything I do, I can't really tell kids what to do. I haven't got no parenting skills. I
mm,
haven't got the kind of advice that you, mum, people, they could talk to their kids about. The one thing I'm good at is when they're in my company, I can walk them across the road without getting them knocked over. I know that security, when people are coming close or
mm,
wherever, I can come in and do the old style thing. Who are you? What are you doing? Those are the only skills I got for that kind of thing.
mm.
But way of advice for anyone under 12, 13, how could I, Kev? I haven't been around them.
But
I
you've
don't know
been one
how
of
they
them.
think.
But you've been one of them, and that's what's
I've
powerful.
been one of them. They're more advanced. They're built more advanced. When I look at, I know what you mean though, Kev. You're perfectly right. But when I look back to how I was,
Mm,
unless all kids feel the same way, I don't know, but I was seriously hurt. I was seriously hurt, but emotional and
mm,
always crying and things. Now they're a bit more wiser. Remember, they're learning a lot more quicker than us
mm,
with certain things. They, little girls and ladies, they're 12 and they're looking like they're 16 and 17 and 18.
yeah.
The boys, they're already out on the streets at 12, robbing with guns and knives
Mm,
and killing each other. When we
mm,
was younger, that wasn't happening.
mm, yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
murders were very few and far between. Now they're like a pack of hound dogs jumping on everybody and saying that they've done the job when
Yeah.
really there's nothing brave about it at all.
No, exactly. And for just last question or so, um, and for parents who may not know what their children may be experiencing or may not recognize the signs, or maybe even be in an abusive relationship, not realizing that there's going to be a ripple effect that's going to affect their children and the family going outwards. Um,
Yeah.
what advice would you give to, firstly, the mother, and what advice would you give to the fathers out there?
See, what one of the most important things, Kevin,
Mm,
that when we was younger, we know that I had a bad man friend. So he won't walk me to my door so my mum and dad can see him, right? Because they're gonna go, "What are you doing with him? He's a
mm,
bad man.
mm,
He's a thief." Blah blah blah. So they hide around the corner.
mm, mm,
You come out and you make sure you go to those schools and you find out who your son's friends are.
mm,
You do more groundwork because information is key.
mm,
You don't just listen, yeah, mum, no, everything's cool. Dad, man, nah, man, that's everything. Leave that, man. They're talking shit, they're manipulating. Oh, is it? Or you might know in your head that he's telling you a little bit of porky. You're not investigating good enough.
yeah,
With
yeah,
me, with me, you getting the CRO, you're getting the full. I'm going
mm,
to the school, I'm looking at the teachers, I'm looking at absolutely everyone, Kevin, the same way I did in there,
yeah,
because I
yeah,
know it goes on. And I
mm,
know that it's important for you, not just, oh, I haven't seen him today, he hasn't been back. But you've got to be more hands on. If they haven't got the skills to be the intelligence bureau like us,
mm,
I can understand that.
mm,
But they're very, very simple little things that
mm,
you can do in that early age. We know mums and dads, for mothers, they're very protective over their boys and whatnot. Dads, they're watching, but there's a lot of one parent. Very, very. It's not like when we was young where parents stayed together,
mm,
Kevin. It's not the same thing no more. It's like everybody's just gone, all right, then everybody do what you're doing.
yeah,
You're all
yeah.
going to do it anyway.
It's very
You all got your
lawless, right?
smartphones. You got your smartphones. You do it.
Mm,
Everybody, no one seems to. Everyone seems to have lost the grip and just relinquished it and just basically gone. The authorities to lock them all away. Not understaffed in prison. Let everybody kill each other. We'll pick up the bits afterwards.
wow.
We know about that in there. We can't do anything about that because
Mm,
if they haven't they're not going to take the time out. They know that. I'm beginning to wonder if they believe themselves
mm.
that it can never be changed.
Wow, wow, wow. So I guess we have to make those changes within our immediate circles, and it would hopefully be a ripple effect going outwards. That's the best we can do, right? Is making sure that we look into ourselves first, be the best who we can be first, and then work outwardly. Um, we can't look at governments because governments throughout history has been the worst example. We can't look at anything like any form of royal families because that within itself is a whole hypocrisy. Um, and so we have to really look at who we are and what we are and our belief system. Are we of and from God? And we have to start building those principles and those core values. And then once we build those core values, and then it can be something that can go outward. So what we're doing right now is a prime example. We look at the problem, we look at the story, and then we kind of start to work out how we're going to map towards going towards a brighter future. What does the future, final question, what does the future look like for you?
The future looks like for me is that since dying, being paralyzed, talking to God, is that I'm happy to wake up every day and
Mm,
be where I am today. For the first time in 15 months, the longest I was ever out in history was 5 months in one go. For
wow.
me to not even think about committing a crime, I
Mm,
don't think about it. It's not even entered my mind.
mm,
I'm happy to have even made it this far. For my
mm,
guilt, for my shame, not for the beginning, but for all the other bits after that,
mm,
I'm here for my reason, with my experiences to make amends and give back. The ultimate altruism for nothing in return. You lot, even if I got millions, take it. It doesn't mean nothing to me no more, Kevin. You know that. People happy when my energy's around
mm.
and they get lifted. I'm happy that you're happy. So if you're happy because of me, that's more than any money that could ever come from me. because I know deep down the jewelry, all the material stuff, it never really meant that much to me, big man.
Mm,
Really. From what from the way that I've grown and putting on that chain and looking in the mirror and then thinking that you're somebody, and because he does it that way, we'll do it this way. Oh yeah, but we learned from that. Oh yeah, and then you learn everybody's characteristics and ridges and
mhm.
the way that they do it. You nick every little bit that you saw from growing up from everything, and then you become the finished article as a hardened criminal based on all the different characters you meet, which is why prison, in a way, is a breeding ground for more crime.
Yeah,
Does
exactly.
it ever end, Kevin
Exactly.
Bennett? Does it
Exactly.
ever end, or is it going to get worse and worse and worse, like it is? Because loss of life is coming easier now,
Wow.
sadly.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. We've gone over, way over, but talking to you, man, I just became more engrossed. So I really appreciate your time, and you more than most people out there understand what quality time and time overall actually means. So I really appreciate the fact that I've had some of your time. Um, is there anything you would like to just leave, or would you like people to find you or check you out on social
Ever
media? It's,
If they ever want any help, support, or get anything from my videos, I never say like and subscribe. I never say come and join me on my channel. All I say is if you ever want to find me and you want to hear any messages, because there's going to be some big ones now that clean time. Now I'm in the best form of my life at the moment now, Kev,
brilliant,
after a downward time a couple of
brilliant.
months ago. I've crossed the hurdles. I realize now that certain behaviors are just not acceptable, whether you're in crime or not. Had
Mhm.
to learn the basics again, but only have to get hurt once after those years of not being taught right. And then I go, right, finally, let's do it the way you want to do it, Sam. Forget the way what all they're doing,
Mhm.
Kevin. We are not interested no more. But if they want to
Exactly.
find me, Yammy B TV, YouTube.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for your time, for your energy, and just who you are. I appreciate you. You're a true inspiration. Thank you very
All right.
much.
Thank you, Kevin. It's been a pleasure, man.
All right. Thanks.
All right, my boy. Sending loads of love, big man.
Thank you.
Take it easy
All right.
anytime, yeah?
Thank you
Kev?
very much. Yeah.
All right. Big
100%.
up to the
You too.
family and all that now.
You
All
too.
right, big
Take
man?
care. Thank you.
Sending loads of love, mate.
All right.
Sweet as a nut.